Thank you, Sonia. Thank you for joining me today. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Me too.
So, before we start, I would love to know about you. And actually, this is the first time we are talking, right? So, I want you to introduce and let's see.
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Sonia, also known as Silent Contemplations on YouTube. I post videos about my philosophies, thoughts, contemplations, and poetry. And alongside this, I also work in advertising in the UK. Media is where I work. Yeah, that's just about me. How about you?
Well, my name is Raushan, and I'm from Bihar, India. And I recently graduated with English honors, and currently I'm working in a school as an English teacher. And I recently started my YouTube channel where I talk about books, movies, and I invite people like you to talk about language learning. And I haven't talked about philosophy, but let's see how it goes today.
There you go.
And, I really liked your channel's name, and that's why I approached you. The kind of things you talked in your videos, and being lost, individuality. I really like those ideas. So please talk to us about your channel's niche and how it started.
Absolutely. So I created Silent Contemplations maybe March this year, earlier this year.
Mm,
And it was a way for me to have that third space. I was having quite a rough time earlier this year. I would go to work and then come back home. That would
mm,
be it. Um, but one thing I realized is I really crave that third space, that one space where I could be myself. And the only way I could really be myself before then was just journaling. So I thought maybe I can create a YouTube channel where after work or whenever I have a thought or a contemplation that I keep in silent, I
mm,
can talk about it and I can share it. So I created it for myself, and then I started performing poetry at open mic nights in real life. And I
mm.
decided to post videos of my poetry as well. And I've created this beautiful little community, or rather, the community has found me. And that's sort of Silent Contemplations and what it's about.
So it's all your thoughts and journaling kind of stuff, right?
That's right.
But the poetry element is just so beautiful. I mean, we don't give that much thought, people like me, or we don't think a lot about poetry. So, like, when and how did your interest in poetry started?
Oh, it's a really good question. I was quite young when I started writing poems and songs. I used to be a
Mm.
singer, and I still am. When I was younger, I used to always sit and like write little songs and poems. They were awful, but I used to do it. And
Yes.
then I grew older, and then I started writing more and more. And then eventually, when you get older, you spend more time with yourself. And
Mm,
poetry became that way of me to explore who I am, Sonia, Silent Contemplations. And so I sort of started writing poetry that way. But I feel like as I've gotten older, it's less that
mm,
I write the poetry, but the poetry comes to me and I just give it like a little body to live
mm.
inside, which is the words. Um, but that sort of poetry aspect and sharing it with people, performing it on YouTube is really lovely because I'm not sure if you've seen the comments on my videos, but people write their own poems underneath it, and it's
Yes,
really
yes.
lovely.
I
It's
read
cute.
those.
They're
Mm.
really cute.
And like, do you have some kind of inspiration or a kind of routine that you follow that today I'm going to write? Or does it, as you talk, that it comes naturally to you now as you are growing older? But like, did you have any kind of routine earlier?
I'm not sure about routine. I think it was mostly like when I was really emotionally charged or really deep in thought, then the
Mm,
poem would come to mind. There's been instances where I have been sitting alone and this little like the way I can describe it is like energy, like balls of energy. They come
mm,
and they visit me, and they come to me so I can give it a body, a vessel, a way to live. And the way they want to live is through words. So, for example, sometimes I'll just be working or I'd be eating popcorn or something, and this idea comes to my head, and I have to write it. I have to give
mm.
this poem justice with as much as I know. So it's quite spontaneous.
Yes.
I wish there was routine, but there's
Mm.
no routine.
Great. And what about your inspirations? Do you have some favorite poets or like whom you admire a lot and kind of you want to write like them, or is it something that you do for yourself?
Oh, I think it's both. I think I write for myself usually, but I am inspired by lots of poets. Rumi is one
Hmm.
of my favorites.
Rumi.
I love Rumi. His his poetry is really beautiful because it can be translated and still be understood. It doesn't really depend on the rhythm, and
Hmm. Yes.
it still holds power, right? Like it's not in English by default. When it is translated to English, it still holds something special, which I really love.
Actually, I read Rumi last year during Ramjan. Like I used to fast, and one of my friends told me that you should read Rumi. And as you talked, like translation, I read the English translation, and he writes in a manner like, how was it for you when you read for the first time, Rumi? How was it for you?
Oh, I was like, who is this wise person? Can I meet them? And then I'm like, okay, they're not alive anymore.
Hmm.
But oops. But they were really, really cool. I remember reading Rumi's work because one of my biggest thing is oneness. I am really influenced by Hermetic philosophy, which is Egyptian philosophy from Hermes Trismegistus. And there's a book called The Kabbalion, which I adore. And it really focuses on the laws of the universe and oneness. That coupled with teachings from Sikhism, Guru Nanak Dev
Hmm.
Ji talking about oneness, has been like a really big thing for me. So seeing Rumi talking about oneness, talking about God in the most beautiful way ever, really, it felt so right. It wasn't like, you know, it had purpose in it. It's like it had
Hmm.
energy, it had purpose. You know, it's been years since he wrote the poem, or the poems, but they live on, which, yeah, I don't think I've ever really experienced that in any other
I
work
think
except for him.
his writings are really universal. Anybody can relate with them.
That's it.
And what about your other media preferences? Do you consume other form of media? And
So I I usually read books,
mm,
books and audiobooks. I watch YouTube too. One of my close friends is also a YouTuber, and he does the same thing. He just doesn't do poetry, but he talks about his thoughts. Um, so that's sort of my main mediums. I don't really watch TV or movies, which is weird, um, particularly because I work in media. Um, but yeah, the main thing is sort of books and
mm.
audiobooks and live performance. Those are the main sorts of media that I consume.
Do you have any favorite books or authors?
My favorite book, I've got three. Okay.
Three.
So
All right. Mm,
number one is The Kabbalion by the Three
mm,
Initiates. Number two is The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. And
mm.
number three is The Game of Life and How to Play It by Florence Scovel. Yeah, those are my top three books. I love all of them deeply. How about you?
And I have so many, but I haven't read any of those three. It's so
Well, now you
difficult
should.
to. Yes, that second one you mentioned about subconscious mind, like this is something which I have been trying to read. I haven't got a copy yet, but one of my friends talked about it. Like he is into non-fiction, and he recommended me to read it. Like you have to read it.
Hmm.
But I like, I have been recently reading Khalil Gibran or Gibran. I don't
Oh,
know how to
yes,
say
The
it.
Prophet.
The
His book, The
Prophet. I
Prophet.
really love. Yes, I have read it so many times, and it is something that every time I'm reading it, there is something new for me. Have you read it?
Yes, I've got it upstairs in my bedroom. It's so good because particularly the way that they describe like different parts and like different things such as love and
Aspects of our
family.
life. Hmm.
That's it. So well articulated. And to think it
Yes.
wasn't even written in English, but
In
even though it's translated in English, it's still
hmm.
powerful. Like
Fully.
I really
Yes.
love that. It's really good. Top four. That's number four.
Tough one. And it is my number one. And then, are you into classics?
I don't really have much exposure to them, but I would love to get
Hmm.
into them.
Recently, like for the past 2 years, I have been reading Russian literature. I read
Hmm.
Dostoevsky and Tolstoy. Tolstoy was like a little bit lengthy, but Dostoevsky was something which I didn't have to put much effort. I kept on reading. So
Yeah.
I was reading the Brothers Karamazov, and I really liked it. Like I didn't have, for us, especially people like me who didn't read since childhood, especially English. Dostoevsky was something which I didn't have to put much effort. Like I kept on reading, reading.
Yeah.
So how long have you been living in UK? I think you're from India, right? Or were you born there?
So I was born in the UK, but my parents are
Hmm.
from India. So I've had sort of I've grown up here and I've had exposure to British culture, but I've grown up in a
Hmm.
very Indian family,
Hmm.
which is quite nice. I get to experience best of both
Both
worlds.
of the cultures.
That's it, which is very lovely.
I wanted to talk about the things you romanticize, being lost and finding something good about it. So, how do you think all of this stuff? I mean, I was really fascinated by the fact that you were talking about individuality and being lost, especially that factor.
Hmm. Absolutely. I think it's very beautiful how we exist in infinity. Like it's undeniable that this will be forever, right? Existence will
Mm,
be forever. But within existence is a tiny little bracket. And if you zoom into that bracket is Earth. And if you zoom into
yes,
Earth, there's us. And
yes,
it's fascinating because we're this small. There's going to be a start and there's going to be an end. And that's really beautiful because we will never, ever live this exact life. No one has lived like you. No one's lived like
mm,
me. No one ever will. No one ever did. So that's really beautiful, our own individuality. But equally, we existed before us, not in reincarnation or incarnations specifically. I mean that we were little atoms somewhere in space that came together piece by piece to make us. And then afterwards, the same thing will happen. We'll deteriorate. Our atoms will
mm,
scatter again. The earth will explode again at some point, and we'll come back in different form. So it's really beautiful when you put it in that perspective. So being lost is the most
mm,
beautiful thing ever because you get to experience it. You get to experience the beauty of being upset, being lost, being scared, being happy, all of this palette of emotion you can experience during this finite little life you have here. But
yes.
imagine that finite bracket and there's infinity. Like, it's so beautiful for me to see that. I don't really know if it's romanticizing. I think it's just seeing it for what it is, not running to like a one, not running to only the good, but
Mm.
experiencing it, feeling it. That's one thing that I really love.
That's really cool. But at the same time, when you are reading classics or engaging in all sorts of media, you feel like there is so much similarity between us. Like we are individuals, but at the same time, what we went through, what we are going through, somebody has already been through that.
Hmm. That's
So,
it.
in that manner, how do you think? Like, does it help you in a manner to cope with whatever is going in your life? Thinking about that we are so small and
Yeah. I mean, it's very nice. I'm particularly fascinated by space, as you
mm,
could probably tell. I really want to study at some point, like astrophysics and philosophy, at some point, but who knows?
mm,
Um, but I think it's quite comforting how we're all very similar. We all come from the same thing. We're all under one sun. It's
mm,
really nice to know that because you don't feel that alone, but equally you have that flexibility to be yourself,
mm.
um, which is, I think, quite nice.
It is, it is. And currently I'm reading this book, Brave New World. You might have heard of this one.
Oh, I've heard of it.
Even in this book, there was something like it's a dystopian society where everybody is kind of same. There is no love, no father, no mother. There is nothing. Whatever we have right now in that world, there is nothing.
Oh.
And the one who is creating this society, he talks that he has removed literature, art, and science, real science, which you were talking about here. So I wanted to ask you, for example, people who are not economically good or they don't have time to think about art, how can we, make it accessible for them, art
Hmm.
or poetry or anything in that manner?
Absolutely. I don't really think you need money to
Hmm.
experience art. You can look outside, like right now I'm looking at our house and there's so much beauty in it. The color of the grey, the color of the white, all of it. I think I've mentioned it in one of my videos, but the beauty in art comes from inside. There's like an explosion of color bubbling within you. And you see a
Mm.
palette, you see something that's beautiful, and you completely splatter that paint onto it, and that's the art. So anything I think is art. And also, if you just look around, you'll see that art is everywhere. Like everywhere, Roshan, it's
Everywhere.
everywhere. Everywhere.
Mm.
So I don't think money should ever be a limiting factor. Yes, it can give you access to sort of fine art and art um, events and all these things, but
Mm.
art is inescapable. Like even us, like
Yes.
we were formed, we're artistically formed and designed. There's no escaping
Mm.
it.
And what's the role of social media? Yeah? Because now everybody is showing their creativity in a manner, and because of that, even you are creating something. Do you ever feel a kind of? Do you ever compare yourself with other artists in that manner?
Ooh, funny enough, I compared myself today. I think it's very easy to compare yourself to other people, but I think we all have a unique frequency, a unique instrument that we are in this cosmic orchestra. Um, my art style is different to other people's art style. Theirs is
Mm.
different to mine. But the only thing that I think is important is how authentic your art is. And social media, I think, has been really like wonderful for me to meet new artists and even have this
Yes.
little community of mine under Silent Contemplations who share their art
Mm.
and their poetry and music. Even music, I've had people reach out to me and they've taken my work and put it in music tracks and like done remixes with it. Like social media's been lovely so I can get exposed to those people and their unique
Mm.
brilliance.
Now we have more, like anybody from anywhere around the world, they can show their creativity. We have that stage
Definitely.
now. But with that, there is just so much content nowadays, and you feel like you have to create and create. So, do you ever feel the pressure, or do you ever care about the number that I have to put these many videos? Or I guess you don't think about that, or do you?
This is a really good question. I'm loving this interview. What the heck? I I don't really. I think for me, there was one point where I was like, one of my videos is at 25,000 views or something. And I remember
Hmm.
thinking, I need to keep on posting it, keep up the momentum. And then I remembered being like, no, Sonia, you created this channel for you at your own pace. The right people
Hmm.
will find you. It's not really about the views. So I think having that mentality, bringing myself back to where I started, really helps me to not feel the pressure of I need to upload or I need to
Hmm.
make sure my video is like perfect because it's not perfect. I make so many mistakes, but I don't mind it. I think it's beautiful. It's raw.
Yes. And one more question regarding that. Which one is your favorite aspect of YouTube? Whether the comments, likes, or subscribers? I guess comments.
Ooh, ooh. Comments. It's 100% the comments. I have this very beautiful um like community that's been built, but also people email me a lot.
Hmm.
And they just email me and ask me about different things and tell me about how they think about things. Um, so I think that coupled with my email
Hmm.
address, even though it's a business email, people still email it, which I'm not complaining
Hmm.
about. That's really
Yes.
beautiful because I get to interact with so many people I wouldn't have met before.
Hmm. That's great. And my channel's name is language learning. Like when I had started, I just wanted to be comfortable here, like talking to a camera. And it was just I wanted to try speak in English. So that's why I started. And because of it, I have got a kind of audience who wants to learn this language. So do you have any suggestions or recommendation for them that they can do or add in their daily routine to improve their language?
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing is just speaking to people, like how you're
Hmm.
doing it right now. And also, if you don't mind me asking,
Yes.
how long have you been studying English for?
Sorry?
How long have you been studying English for?
English, like I love the stories, so there was never a conscious decision I want to learn English. So I would say class 10th grade, when I was in high school, I started reading a lot, like books in
Mhm.
general and movies and all. I have been doing it since high school, like putting effort to learn this language. That's it. But
Mm.
YouTube for the past 7 or 8 months, I have been doing it.
Nice. To be honest, I always find it very beautiful when people pick up new languages. Like my
Mm.
parents, they were from India and they can speak Punjabi and Hindi. They can read the alphabet. They learned English through living in England, which I was just like, that's crazy. But they can speak English, they can read in English, they know numbers
Mm.
and everything. So
Mm.
for you, for example, I have a lot of respect for you for picking up a language that's completely different to what you probably speak as your mother
Thank
tongue.
you.
But yeah, like hats off to you.
Thank
um,
you. Thank you.
but yeah.
So, do you have anything for the audience that they can do? For example, you are a native speaker now, but you know your father, your parents, they have learned it. So,
Mhm.
how was it for you? Have you ever come to India?
Yes, I was just there this week. I landed 2 days ago.
Do you speak Hindi or not? Just
I speak
Punjabi?
Hindi. मुझको
You
हिंदी आती
speak.
है पंजाबी भी yeah.
That's great. So, give any suggestions for the audience, like what they can do.
Absolutely. So I on my YouTube channel I have poetry in English, Spanish, and Punjabi so far.
Mm.
When I was younger, I studied Korean as well. I have like conversational Korean. I can read it, but I just need to practice speaking a bit more and vocabulary. Um, but the biggest thing that helps me is practice speaking with native people, make
Mm.
friends who are the same age as you, and text them every day or every week. That really helps to make sure that you're able to practice speaking in those language that you want to learn, while
Yes.
also being able to engage in conversations and understand culture. So yeah, find a way to speak to people.
I think conversation, just talk,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. That's it.
Uh, Sonia, I wanted to record this in a cafe because construction work is going at my house, and because of it, I think there is a power cut. But it's Chhat Puja in Bihar, so most of the cafes are closed, and especially the one I usually go to, it is closed today. So,
Closed.
how much time do you have? There are a few more questions I wanted to ask. Can we continue?
I've got so much time. You don't have to worry. I've got so much time.
All right. Then there is one more thing I wanted to ask. Like, when you came to India, did you ever think about the cultural difference here? For example, how long you have been living in UK?
My whole life.
Your whole life. So,
My whole
like,
life.
was it weird for you or completely new experience? Like coming to India.
You know what's weird? How there's cows in the road. That was, I was just like, what? Like, it's so normal. There's just cows in the road and there's like
Hmm.
monkeys outside my bedroom. I'm like, what? That was strange. But I think I really liked it because Punjab is like the Bind, like the, what do you call it in English? The countryside.
Countryside,
Look
yes.
at me not even knowing English. But it's at the countryside and there's so much land, there's so much crops, there's so many people who just farm for a living. And that's so different from London, which is where I'm based, where, it's
Mm.
very commercial. And there was a point last year or 2 years ago when I was in the office and I booked half a day off work because I wanted to reconnect with nature. But all the parks that I could find were just man-made. And
Mm.
I ended up crying because I was just like, where's the like trees? Where's the actual running water? But
Mm.
being in India, or particularly Punjab, it was so accessible to just go, okay, here's like a river, here's the
Mm.
trees, here's the rice crops growing, which was definitely quite different.
That's great. That's great to hear. But do you watch any Indian movies, like how India is represented, or and in Hollywood how India is represented? Did you find it different from those stuff?
Actually, yeah, I think the movies that I've watched make India appear a lot more modern.
Mm.
Um, but there's something really beautiful about it not being so modern, about it having that like ancient or like that not timeless, but it's very
In
beautiful
comparison to
feel to it.
London, it's
Yeah, but it's not backwards. It's like a different filter. But one thing I did
Hmm.
notice
Oh,
actually
different filter.
was,
Yes.
yeah, one thing I did notice though was when I landed in India, there was
Hmm.
like a orange hue everywhere. Like it just looked
Hmm.
orange, like a filter. I was
Hmm.
like, what? Because in England, it's more blue. Like you go outside, everything looks gloomy, blue and grey. Whereas India is more
Yes.
like vibrant and yellow. And also probably because it was Nedavali. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, that was quite different. But I think the way India's portrayed in Hollywood movies and Bollywood movies is quite different.
Yes. There was one thing I wanted to ask, a list of movies that is your favorite from India. Like, do you have?
Of course I have it. What are you asking? Of course I have favorite movies from India. I think Indian cinema as well is just really lovely.
Yes, it
Um,
is.
the best movie is Ashiki 2. Ashiki 2 is just it's
Yes,
traumatic, but it's
the
very good.
songs are out of this world.
Too good. I like Ashiki
Hmm.
2. Um, what's the next one? There's when I was younger, I really loved
Hmm.
this movie called Bhootnath. Have you heard it before?
Bhootnath, Bhootnath,
Yeah, have
Bhootnath.
you?
Yes, I have watched it. Hmm.
I love that movie. It's one of my favorite. And then my top favorite movie ever. Are you ready for this?
Go on.
Is Om Shanti Om.
I understand.
Best movie
I
ever.
understand.
Shah Rukh Khan is just
Saruk Khan. And like in that movie, there is just so much color in comparison to what you saw in India. How
Mhm.
don't you see a difference here? Like how we are portrayed in that movie, we Indians.
Absolutely. I think Om
It's just
Shanti
so
Om was the
colorful.
closest. That's it. I think as well,
Hmm.
like, because I went during Diwali, everything
Hmm.
was full of light and everyone was celebrating, and there's something really special about it that I don't really. It's not that I don't feel it in England, it's just I feel a different atmosphere in England. But it was Diwali and it was colourful, there was lights everywhere. Um, so yeah, that movie definitely is the closest to India, I think.
Great. This is last recommendation I'm going to ask. Do you have some poetry recommendation for me or for the viewers?
Absolutely. That's a really good poem. A very good poem. Really good question. One of my favourite poems is what's it called? Da-da-da-da.
Or
I've
the
forgotten the
poet, or
name. I'll say
it's
the
okay.
poet. I'll say the poet's name because I've forgotten the name, but it's by Albert Camus, and it basically talks about how in the midst of hate, I found there was within me an invincible belief it's love. Um, that's one of my favorite poems. It's Invincible something by Albert Camus. Forgotten the something. That's my favorite. There's a poem by Mary Oliver. I believe it's called
Hmm.
Wild Geese, which is incredibly beautiful. And then of course excerpts from Roomi. His poetry is just I recommend it all.
Yes,
Very beautiful. And then
the prophet.
in
Add the
yeah, the
prophet.
prophet. And the prophet,
Yes.
and the prophet. Um yeah, those are sort of my main sort of poems recommendations.
And if someone is not able to comprehend it in English, the language barrier, like what should they do to take interest in poetry? I guess they should start with their native.
I'd say start with a native, but even
Mm,
then, like go to performances because I perform quite a lot in around London with my poetry.
mm,
And there was one person in particular, he was reading a poem in French. I can't speak French, but
yes,
it touched me so deeply for some reason. I don't know why. I don't understand anything they said, but it really got to my heart. And this proves what I say that I think poetry is energy that lives in a vessel. The poem didn't need to be understood. I didn't need to understand it. But that poem was still able to penetrate your heart. So go and see live performances
mm,
in the language you want to learn and also the language that you're comfortable with. And you'll realize that poetry is more than just words, it's a being in itself.
great. Thank you so much, Sonia. Thank you so much for your time. And
Thank
I
you.
really love talking to you.
So thank you for this. It's really nice to talk about it and hear from you. And also, like with English learning, it's really lovely to have this community that you've built and share these thoughts with them. So thank you, Roshan.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. See you.